The desert wind rolled across the empty plains like a restless ghost. Dust spiraled along the lonely road leading into Dustwood, a rough frontier town where trouble always seemed to arrive before sunrise. Wooden storefronts lined the single muddy street. Horses tied to hitching rails stomped their hooves impatiently, while the distant creak of a windmill echoed across the valley. Inside the Silver Spur Saloon, the smell of whiskey and cigar smoke hung thick in the air. Cowboys laughed loudly around poker tables while a piano player lazily tapped out a tune that sounded older than the desert itself. And standing near the saloon doors was Caleb. Most folks in Dustwood knew Caleb. At 32, he was already one of the most respected ranchers in the territory. Broad shoulders, weathered face, a pair of calm gray eyes that had seen more storms than most men could survive. His ranch Hartley Ridge stretched across miles of golden prairie just outside town. But tonight, Caleb wasn't thinking about cattle. He was watching the storm rolling across the sky. Lightning flashed far across the desert horizon. "It's like hell's about to break loose," muttered the bartender, wiping down a glass. Caleb nodded slowly. "Storm's coming." Then the saloon doors burst open. A gust of wind slammed into the room, carrying sand and cold air, and someone stumbled inside. At first, nobody noticed her. She wore a long, dusty cloak that hid most of her figure, and the hood was pulled low over her face. Her boots were covered in mud, and she moved like someone who had been riding for days without rest. But when she reached the center of the room, she collapsed. The piano stopped. Chairs scraped the floor as every cowboy turned to stare. Caleb moved first. He knelt beside her, gently lifting her shoulders. "Ma'am," he said quietly. Her breathing was shaky. Caleb pushed the hood back just enough to see her face, and for a moment, he forgot how to breathe. She was beautiful, not the polished kind of beauty found in city ladies. This was something raw and striking. Sharp cheekbones, dark tangled hair, and eyes the color of a stormy sky. But those eyes were filled with fear. She grabbed Caleb's wrist suddenly. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. Caleb leaned closer. "What happened to you?" Her eyes darted around the room. As if she expected someone to walk through the doors at any moment. Then she said something that made Caleb's chest tighten. "Please, don't look." Caleb frowned. "Don't look at what?" She hesitated. Her hand moved slowly to the side of her cloak, gripping the fabric tightly as if she was hiding something beneath it. The room had grown quiet. Too quiet. The cowboys were watching. Now, whispering to each other. One of them laughed. "Looks like your lady friend's in trouble." Hartley. Caleb ignored him. Caleb said gently. "You're safe here." The woman shook her head weakly. "Oh, I'm not." Then the saloon doors creaked open again. 3 men stepped inside. Their coats were black with desert dust, and each one carried the cold expression of someone who had killed before. Outlaws. The tallest one scanned the room. Slowly, his eyes landed on the woman lying in Caleb's arms. A cruel smile spread across his face. "Well now," he said. "Looks like we finally found her." The woman's grip on Caleb's shirt tightened instantly. Her nails dug into the fabric. Her voice dropped to a terrified whisper. "They found me." Caleb looked up slowly. "Who are they?" Her voice cracked. "Men who will kill anyone standing near me." The outlaw leader walked forward calmly, his boots echoing against the wooden floor. "Evening, folks," he said smoothly. Nobody answered. The entire saloon had gone silent. The man stopped just a few feet from Caleb. His eyes narrowed. "Hand her over." "Rancher." Caleb didn't move. "Don't know what you're talking about," the outlaw chuckled. "Sure you do." He leaned slightly closer. "That woman stole something that belongs to us." Caleb glanced down at her. She shook her head quickly. "I didn't steal anything," she whispered. The outlaw smirked. "Liar." His hand rested on the grip of his revolver. "Last chance." Caleb slowly stood up, placing himself between the woman and the 3 men. Every cowboy in the saloon leaned back in their chairs. Nobody wanted to be caught in the middle of what was about to happen. Caleb's voice was calm. "You're in Dustwood now." The outlaw tilted his head. And Caleb's eyes hardened. And I don't let armed men drag terrified women out of a saloon. The outlaw laughed. Brave rancher. He pulled his revolver halfway from the holster. But before he could say another word, the woman behind Caleb suddenly gasped. Her cloak slipped slightly off her shoulder, and Caleb saw it. For just a split second, something beneath the fabric, a strange metal chain, and attached to it, a small iron collar locked tightly around her neck. Caleb froze. The woman noticed his eyes drop. Her face turned pale with horror. Please, she whispered desperately. Don't look. But it was too late. Caleb had already seen. And suddenly, he realized something terrifying. This woman wasn't just running from outlaws. She was their prisoner, and the man pointing a gun at him was coming to take his property back. The outlaw smiled. Slowly, now you understand the situation. The saloon air felt like gunpowder, waiting for a spark. Caleb looked down at the terrified woman behind him, then back at the three armed men. His jaw tightened. Funny thing, Caleb said quietly. The outlaw raised an eyebrow. What's that? Caleb rested his hand slowly on his revolver. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. The outlaw's smile faded. Yeah? Caleb's voice dropped to a cold whisper. You walked into my town. The room held its breath. And then the outlaw pulled his gun. But at that exact moment, the woman screamed something that made Caleb's blood run cold. No. If they catch me, they'll kill the rancher too. The outlaw grinned. Too late. And suddenly gunfire exploded inside the saloon. The first gunshot shattered the silence of the Silver Spur Saloon like lightning splitting a desert sky. Glass exploded behind the bar. Cowboys dove under tables. Chairs flipped over as men scrambled to avoid them. Bullets flying across the room. But Caleb Hartley didn't flinch. Years of life on the frontier had trained him well. His hand moved faster than thought, drawing his revolver in one smooth motion. Bang! His shot struck the outlaw's revolver, knocking it clean out of the man's hand. The gun clattered across the wooden floor. The outlaw cursed and lunged for cover. The other two men fired wildly, bullets punching holes into the saloon walls. Everybody down, someone shouted. Caleb grabbed the frightened woman by the arm. Come with me. They ducked behind an overturned poker table as another bullet slammed into a nearby chair. The woman trembled violently. Her breath came in short, panicked gasps. They can't catch me, she whispered desperately. You don't understand what they'll do. Caleb glanced at the iron collar around her neck again. The metal looked heavy and cruel, like something used for animals instead of people. His jaw tightened. Yeah, he said quiet. Starting to understand. Another shot rang out. Wood splintered above their heads. One of the outlaws shouted, Hartley, you're making a real bad decision. Caleb didn't answer. Instead, he leaned out from cover and fired again. Bang! One outlaw yelped as the bullet grazed his shoulder. The man stumbled backward toward the saloon doors. Boss, he shouted. The leader cursed angrily. This ain't over, rancher. The three outlaws backed toward the exit, firing one last warning shot before bursting through the doors and disappearing into the storm outside. Silence returned slowly to the saloon. Smoke drifted through the air. Someone coughed. Another cowboy muttered, Damn near started a war in here. Caleb lowered his revolver, but his attention immediately returned to the woman beside him. She was shaking uncontrollably. Her hands clutched the cloak around her body like armor. You okay? Caleb asked gently. She nodded, though her eyes were filled with lingering terror. They'll come back, she said softly. Caleb stood and offered his hand. Then we better not be here when they do. She hesitated. Why are you helping me? Caleb shrugged. Because men who put collars on women deserve a bullet. A faint flicker of something crossed her face. Relief. Maybe even trust. She took his hand. He helped her stand. Outside, the storm had finally broken across Dustwood. Rain poured from the dark sky in thick sheets, while thunder rolled across the desert. Caleb whistled sharply. From across the street, A large chestnut horse lifted its head. "Come on, Rusty," Caleb called. The horse trotted over, obediently. The woman stared at the animal with surprise. "That's a beautiful horse," Caleb chuckled. "He knows it too." He helped her climb into the saddle before mounting behind her. She stiffened slightly at the closeness, but she didn't protest. "Where are we going?" she asked. "My ranch," Caleb replied. "Hartley Ridge." The horse galloped out of town, hooves splashing through muddy puddles as the storm raged around them. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Only the sound of rain and thunder filled the darkness. Eventually, the woman whispered, "You shouldn't have helped me." Caleb smirked. "Too late now. You don't know who those men are." "Outlaws," he said simply. She shook her head. "No." Her voice grew quieter. "They're worse than outlaws." That made Caleb's expression turn serious. "Who are they?" The woman hesitated again, then she said something that made the night feel colder. "They belong to a man named Victor Kane." Caleb frowned. The name sounded familiar. "Rancher?" he asked. "Something like that," she replied bitterly. "He owns land, mines, people." Caleb's grip on the reins tightened. "What's your name?" She was silent for several seconds, then she finally answered, "Clara." The name felt soft in the storm. "I'm Caleb," he said. "I know," she whispered. That surprised him. "You do?" "Everyone in Dustwood knows the name Caleb." "Hartley," he laughed quietly. "That can't be good." "It is," she said. "You're known for helping people." They rode in silence again for several miles. Finally, the ranch came into view. Hartley Ridge stretched across the dark prairie like a fortress of lantern, light, and wooden fences. The ranch house stood proudly at the center of the property. Clara stared in amazement. "It's beautiful." Caleb helped her down from the horse. "You're safe here." For the first time since he met her, Clara smiled. But the moment didn't last long. As Caleb guided her toward the ranch house, the wind shifted slightly, pushing her cloak aside. The iron collar around her neck glinted in the lantern light. Caleb studied it carefully. Now, it wasn't just a collar. A small metal device was attached to the front, a lock, and something else, something mechanical. "Hold on," Caleb said slowly. Clara froze. "What?" Caleb leaned closer, his voice lowered. "This isn't just a collar." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" Caleb touched the metal carefully, then he felt it. A faint ticking sound. Very quiet, but unmistakable. His stomach dropped. He looked up at Clara. "Did they tell you about this thing?" Fear flooded her face instantly. "No." Caleb swallowed hard. "Clara." His voice turned deadly serious. "I think they did." Her breathing quickened. "What are you talking about?" Caleb stepped back slowly, because now he could hear it clearly. Tick, tick, tick. A timer. And suddenly, he realized the horrifying truth. The collar around Clara's neck wasn't just a restraint. It was a bomb. And somewhere out in the dark desert, Victor Kane's men were probably watching, waiting. Caleb's heart pounded as Clara whispered the question that made everything worse. "What is it?" Caleb looked at her pale face and realized something terrifying. If he told her the truth, she might panic, and panic could get them both killed. But before he could answer, a distant explosion echoed across the desert hills. Caleb's head snapped toward the horizon. Flames suddenly lit the sky near Dustwood. Clara gasped. "What was that?" Caleb stared into the storm. His voice dropped into a grim whisper. "That was a warning." Then he looked back at the ticking collar around her neck and realized something even worse. The timer was already counting down. The ticking sound felt louder with every passing second. Tick, tick, tick. The storm raged across Hartley Ridge Ranch, wind rattling the wooden shutters of the ranch house, while lightning illuminated the wide prairie in flashes of silver light. But inside the yard, Caleb Hartley felt colder than the desert night. His eyes were locked on the iron collar around Clara's neck. The faint mechanical ticking coming from the device was unmistakable. A timer. And if Caleb had learned anything during his years on the frontier, It was that men like Victor Kane didn't waste time building things that didn't serve a purpose. Caleb? Clara whispered nervously. She had noticed the way his face had changed. The calm confidence from earlier was gone. Now, there was something darker in his expression, something closer to fear. What is it? She asked again. Caleb forced himself to breathe slowly. If he panicked, she would panic, and that could get them both killed. It's complicated, he said carefully. Her eyes widened. Complicated how? Another tick echoed from the device. Caleb stepped closer, inspecting the metal mechanism attached to the collar. It was small, but carefully engineered. A thin brass plate covered a cluster of tiny gears, and a small dial was counting down slowly. 30 minutes. Caleb's stomach twisted. He looked back at Clara. Did Kane ever explain the collar? He asked. She shook her head quickly. No. They locked it on me 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks? Her voice trembled. They said if I tried to escape, I'd regret it. Caleb ran a hand through his hair. Well, he muttered grimly. Looks like they weren't bluffing. Clara grabbed his arm. What do you mean? Caleb hesitated, but he couldn't hide the truth anymore. That collar. It's got a bomb in it. For a moment, the storm outside seemed to stop. Clara's face drained of all color. Bomb? Caleb nodded slowly. Her legs nearly gave out beneath her. He caught her before she collapsed. No, 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 she whispered, panic flooding her voice. You're lying. That's impossible. I wish I was. Tears filled her eyes. They wouldn't do that. Caleb's voice was firm. Men like Victor Kane absolutely would. Lightning flashed again across the ranch. Clara grabbed the collar desperately. Get it off me. Don't touch it. Caleb snapped. She froze instantly. Why? Because if it's wired the way I think it is, Caleb said carefully. Pulling on the wrong piece could set it off. Her breathing turned ragged. How much time do we have? Caleb glanced again at the small ticking dial. 27 minutes. Not enough, he muttered. Clara stared at him in horror. Caleb? Yeah, I don't want to die. The quiet honesty in her voice hit him harder than any bullet. You're not dying tonight, Caleb said firmly. How do you know? Because I said so. He grabbed her hand and led her toward the ranch house. Inside, the warm lantern light cast long shadows across the wooden walls. Caleb rushed to a workbench near the fireplace. Tools lay scattered across the surface. Pliers, screwdrivers, and mechanical parts from years of ranch repairs. He gently guided Clara into a chair. Sit. She obeyed without argument. Her hands were shaking badly now. Caleb knelt behind her and carefully examined the collar again. The device was cleverly designed. Too cleverly. You said Kane put this on you? Caleb asked. Yes. Why? Clara hesitated. Her silence told Caleb everything. Clara, he said quietly, what did you take from him? Her eyes filled with guilt. I didn't steal anything. Then why are they chasing you? She looked down at her hands. Because I know something. Caleb's jaw tightened. What? Her voice dropped to a whisper. Kane's building something out in the desert. Caleb frowned. Building what? A prison. The word hung heavily in the air. For who? Anyone who crosses him. Clara swallowed hard. He's been buying land all across the territory, forcing ranchers out, taking control of the mines. Caleb's eyes narrowed. And he's using prisoners to work those mines. The realization hit Caleb slowly. Slaves. Clara nodded. Yes. She wiped a tear from her cheek. I was one of them. Caleb stared at her. You? They took me from a wagon train 3 months ago, she said quietly. Locked me in chains and forced me to work in the mines. Anger burned deep in Caleb's chest. And the collar? I escaped, she said. How? Her voice trembled again. I found something. Caleb paused. What? Clara reached slowly into her cloak. For a moment, Caleb thought she was about to panic again, but instead she pulled out a small folded piece of paper. She handed it to him. Caleb unfolded it. His eyes widened instantly. It was a map. A detailed map of the desert territory surrounding Dustwood, but one location was circled in red, a hidden canyon. What is this? Caleb asked. Clara's voice dropped to a whisper. Kane's main camp. Caleb stared at the map. Where he keeps the prisoners. Yes, and the mines? She nodded again. And now he wants the map back. Caleb said, exactly. The ticking collar echoed again. Tick, tick, tick. Caleb glanced at the timer. 18 minutes. His mind raced. Clara, he said slowly. What? I think Kane planted this bomb for 2 reasons. Her eyes filled with dread. What reasons? First, Caleb said, to kill you. And the second? Caleb's expression turned grim. To kill anyone who tries to help you. Clara's voice cracked. You mean, you? Caleb shrugged. Wouldn't be the first time someone tried. She stared at him. Why are you still helping me? Caleb looked directly into her storm gray eyes. Because nobody deserves to die with the collar around their neck. Her lip trembled. Outside. Thunder roared again, but suddenly, Caleb heard something else. A distant sound. Whose? Many of them. His head snapped toward the window. Torches were moving across the dark prairie. A large group of riders was approaching the ranch. Clara saw them too. Her face turned pale with terror. They found us. Caleb's eyes hardened. How many men does Kane usually send? Her voice barely came out. Sometimes. 20. Caleb counted the approaching torches. There were far more than 20. His stomach dropped. Clara? What? That's not 20 riders. Her voice shook. How many? Caleb whispered the number. Slowly. 50. Clara gasped. The collar ticked. Louder. 15 minutes left. The riders were getting closer. And suddenly, a rifle shot cracked across the ranch yard. A bullet shattered. The ranch house window. Glass. Exploded across the floor. Voice shouted from outside. Caleb Hartley. Caleb stepped toward the door slowly. The voice continued. You're harboring stolen property. Clara trembled behind him. The voice laughed cruelly. Bring the girl outside. Or we burn your ranch to the ground. Caleb looked back at Clara, then at the ticking bomb around her neck, then at the 50 armed riders surrounding his land, and he realized something terrible. Victor. Kane wasn't just trying to kill Clara, he was declaring war. The wind outside Hartley Ridge Ranch howled like a pack of wolves. 50 torches burned across the dark prairie, surrounding the ranch house in a slow, tightening circle. The riders sat tall in their saddles, rifles slung across their backs and pistols ready at their sides. They weren't just outlaws, they were an army. Inside the ranch house, shattered glass crunched under Caleb Hartley's boots as he stepped toward the broken window. Another rifle shot rang out. The bullet buried itself in the wooden wall inches from his head. Step outside. Hartley. A voice shouted through the storm. Caleb recognized the voice now. It's Vane. Victor. Kane's right-hand man. A ruthless gunfighter known across 3 territories for leaving bodies behind him. Caleb glanced back at Clara. She was standing in the center of the room. Pale and trembling, her hands gripping the edges of the table. The iron collar around her neck continued its relentless ticking. Tick, tick, tick. 12 minutes. Caleb felt the weight of the moment pressing down on his chest. Caleb, Clara whispered. He turned toward her. What? You should give me to them. The words hit him like a punch. No, her eyes were full of desperate honesty. If you don't, they'll kill you. They'll burn your ranch and everyone on it. I don't have anyone else on this ranch, Caleb said quietly. That's not the point. She cried. Yes, it is. Clara stared at him, stunned by the stubborn determination in his voice. You barely know me, she said. That hasn't stopped me before. Her eyes softened slightly. But this is different. Caleb walked over and gently took her shoulders. You said Kane's building a prison. Yes. And enslaving people. Her voice shook. Yes. Caleb looked straight into her eyes. Then you're not dying tonight, eh? Tear rolled down Clara's cheek. Why? He gave a small crooked smile. Because I'm stubborn. Before she could respond, boom. An explosion rocked the front yard. Flames erupted as Kane's men set fire to the barn. The horses inside whinnied in terror. Clara gasped. "They're burning your ranch." Caleb grabbed his rifle from the wall. "Not if I can help it." He opened the door slightly and fired 2 quick shots into the darkness. Bang! Bang! One of the riders fell from his horse. The others scattered, firing back immediately. Bullets slammed into the wooden walls of the house. Caleb shut the door again. "They're serious," Clara said. Caleb snorted. "So am I." The ticking collar echoed louder now. 10 minutes. Clara clutched the metal ring around her neck. "We're running out of time." Caleb returned to the workbench and studied the device again. The bomb was small but deadly. A thin copper wire connected the timer to a tiny explosive chamber hidden beneath the collar plate. Cut the wrong wire, and it would explode instantly. Caleb wiped sweat from his forehead. "Who built this thing?" he muttered. Clara answered quietly. "Kane hires engineers from the mining companies." "Of course he does." Another explosion shook the ranch. The barn roof collapsed into flames. Clara looked at the window in horror. "They're destroying everything." Caleb ignored the chaos outside. His focus was entirely on the collar now. 8 minutes. He carefully removed a small screwdriver from his toolkit and began loosening the screws on the brass plate. The metal cover slowly came loose. Inside was a maze of tiny gears, springs, and wires. Caleb whistled softly. "Damn." Clara swallowed. "That bad?" "Whoever built this was good." Gunfire erupted outside again. Lucas Vane's voice shouted through the storm. "Hartley? Last chance." Caleb continued working. "Ignore him." Clara's breathing was becoming uneven. "What if you're wrong about the wires?" Caleb didn't answer, because the truth was, he didn't know. 7 minutes. Suddenly, Clara spoke again. "Caleb." "What?" "There's something I didn't tell you." His hands paused. "What now?" Her voice trembled. "Kane didn't just enslave people in the mines." Caleb slowly looked up. "What do you mean?" Her eyes filled with pain. "He's planning to take over the entire territory." "That's ambitious." "No," he whispered. "It's already happening." Caleb frowned. "What are you talking about?" Clara hesitated, then she said something that made Caleb's heart skip. "He has help." "From who?" Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "Someone in Dustwood." Caleb's mind raced. "Who?" Clara looked away. "I don't know his name." "What do you know?" "He's powerful." "That narrows it down." "He's a rancher." Caleb froze. "A rancher. In Dustwood." Clara's voice cracked. "I overheard Kane talking to him." Caleb's mind flashed through every ranch owner in the region, but one name stood above the rest. Someone wealthy. Someone powerful. Someone who had been strangely quiet about Kane's growing influence. Caleb whispered the name slowly. "Samuel Briggs." Clara looked up instantly. "That's him." Caleb felt a cold anger settle in his chest. Samuel Briggs owned the largest cattle empire in the territory. If he was working with Kane, then this was bigger than anyone imagined. 5 minutes. The ticking grew loud. Outside, the ranch house porch suddenly exploded inward as Kane's men kicked down the front gate. Boots thundered across the yard. "They're coming inside," Clara cried. Caleb grabbed his rifle again. "Stay here." "Oh." But Caleb was already moving. He kicked open the door and stepped onto the porch. The storm rain drenched him instantly. 6 riders were charging toward the house. Caleb fired twice. 2 men fell. The others scattered, firing back. Bullets tore through the porch railing. Caleb ducked behind a wooden post. Lucas Vane rode forward through the smoke and rain. A cruel smile spread across his face. "You should have handed her over." "Hartley." Caleb spat into the mud. "Still got time." Is laughed. "You really think you're saving her?" He pointed toward the house. "That collar's already counting down." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "How much time left?" Lucas shrugged. "Couple minutes maybe." Then he leaned forward slightly. "And when it explodes?" His grin widened. "There won't be enough of her left to bury." Rage burned through Caleb. He fired again. Lucas barely dodged the bullet. Then the outlaw leader signaled his men. take the house. Riders charged forward. Caleb turned and ran back inside. Clara stood frozen near the table. How long? She asked. Caleb glanced at the timer. 3 minutes. His voice was calm now. Too calm. I need you to trust me. She nodded immediately. Do. He grabbed the wire cutters. 2 wires remained connected to the detonator. 1 red, 1 blue. Clara whispered the question. Neither of them wanted to ask. Which one? Caleb stared at the wires. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. Outside, the front door burst open. Boots stormed inside the ranch house. Lucas Vane stepped through the doorway with a pistol raised. Well, he said slowly, it's like the timer's almost up. Caleb's hand tightened around the cutters. 30 seconds. Lucas smiled. Go ahead, rancher. He tilted his head. Pick a wire. The ticking filled the room. Clara closed her eyes. Caleb raised the cutters, and then he made his choice. The ticking sound echoed through the ranch house like a hammer striking steel. Tick, tick, tick. 30 seconds. The storm outside roared against the wooden walls, thunder shaking the house as rain poured down in sheets. Inside, the tension was suffocating. Caleb Hartley stood frozen beside Clara. The wire cutters clutched tightly in his hand. 2 wires. 1 red, 1 blue. And behind them, standing in the doorway with the revolver aimed directly at Caleb's chest, was Lucas Vane. The outlaw's cruel smile spread slowly across his face. Well, he said mockingly, clock's running, rancher. Clara's eyes were closed tightly. Her hands gripped the sides of the chair as if she were bracing for death. Caleb, she whispered. Her voice trembled. It's okay. He looked at her. For a moment, the world seemed to shrink down to just the 2 of them. Storm, gunfire, outlaws, none of it mattered. Only her. You said you trust me, Caleb murmured. Clara nodded without opening her eyes. I do. Les chuckled darkly. 20 seconds. Caleb took a slow breath. He studied the wires again. Both looked identical, both connected to the detonator. But then something caught his attention. The blue wire had a tiny scratch near the base, like someone had clipped it once before and repaired it. A mistake. A tiny flaw in the design. Caleb's eyes hardened. He raised the cutters. Lucas leaned forward eagerly. Go on. 15 seconds, Clara whispered softly. Whatever happens. Thank you. Caleb gave a small smile, then snip. The cutters sliced cleanly through the blue wire. The ticking stopped. Instantly, silence filled the room. Lucas Vane blinked. What the hell? The bomb was disarmed. Clara slowly opened her eyes. Her hands trembled as she touched the collar around her neck. It stopped. Caleb exhaled deeply. You're safe. Lucas's smile vanished completely. Well, he said coldly, that's unfortunate. He raised his revolver. But it doesn't change anything. Behind him, several armed riders stepped into the house. Mud-covered boots stomped across the wooden floor. Guns aimed straight at Caleb and Clara. Lucas tilted his head slightly. You see, rancher, Kane didn't send us here just for the girl. Caleb narrowed his eyes. No? Lucas shook his head. He sent us to make an example. He gestured around the burning ranch outside. You embarrassed him in Dustwood. His finger tightened on the trigger. So now you die. Before Lucas could fire, a loud whistle echoed across the stormy ranch yard. Every outlaw froze. Lucas frowned. What was that? Then it happened. Gunfire erupted outside the ranch house. Bang, bang, bang. Shouts echoed across the property. More riders were arriving. But these weren't Kane's men. They were cowboys. Dozens of them. Lucas rushed to the window. What the? Through the rain, lanterns and rifles were moving across the fields. A group of armed ranchers charged toward the house. Leading them was Sheriff Daniel Cole of Dustwood. Caleb smirked. Looks like the town finally decided to wake up. Lucas turned back, furious. You think a few lawmen scare us? Caleb shrugged. Not really. Then he added calmly. But there's about 30 of them out there. As hesitated, another explosion of gunfire ripped through the yard. 2 of his men outside screamed as they were shot off their horses. Sheriff Cole's voice boomed through the storm. Lucas Vane, you're surrounded. Lucas snarled, damn it. Caleb took a slow step forward. You should leave. Lucas raised his revolver again. You first. But before he could fire, Clara suddenly stood up. Lucas blinked in surprise. What the hell are you doing? Clara's voice was steady now. You want the map? Lucas froze. You have it? She slowly pulled the folded paper from her cloak. Lucas's eyes lit up greedily. Well now, that changes things. He lowered his gun slightly. Hand it over. Clara stepped closer, but Caleb immediately grabbed her arm. What are you doing? He whispered. She looked at him calmly. Trust me, reluctantly. He released her. Clara walked slowly toward Lucas. The outlaw reached out for the map eagerly, but the moment his fingers touched it, Clara yanked it back. Lucas blinked in confusion. What? And then she threw the map straight into the fireplace. The paper burst into flames. Instantly, Is screamed with rage. You idiot. He lunged forward to grab it, but the map was already turning to ash. Clara stepped back calmly. You'll never find the camp now. Is's face twisted with fury. You stupid girl. He raised his revolver again, but Caleb moved faster. Bang. His bullet struck Lucas's gun hand. The outlaw screamed as the revolver flew across the floor. Immediately, the remaining outlaws opened fire. The ranch house erupted into chaos. Bullets smashed through windows and walls. Caleb grabbed Clara and pulled her behind the table. Outside, the sheriff and his men stormed the house. Gunfire thundered from every direction. Lucas staggered backward, clutching his bleeding hand. You'll regret this, Hartley, he roared. Caleb stepped out from cover, his revolver steady. You're done. Is laughed bitterly. You think this ends here? Caleb fired. The bullet struck Lucas square in the chest. The outlaw collapsed onto the wooden floor. Side. Kane's remaining men fled into the storm as the sheriff's posse chased them across the prairie. Silence slowly returned to Hartley Ridge. The storm began to fade. Inside the ruined ranch house, smoke drifted from broken lanterns and shattered furniture. Caleb lowered his gun. Sheriff Cole stepped inside, scanning the wreckage. Well, he said, looks like you had quite a night. Caleb nodded. You could say that. The sheriff looked at Clara. Is she the one they were hunting? Yes. Clara stepped forward. Nervously, Sheriff Cole studied the iron collar around her neck. His expression darkened. Good Lord. Caleb spoke quietly. We've got bigger problems. The sheriff raised an eyebrow. Such as? Caleb glanced at Clara. Then he said the name that would change everything. Victor Kane. The sheriff's face hardened. You're telling me that bastard is behind all this? Caleb nodded. And he's not alone, Clara added softly. He has allies. Sheriff Cole crossed his arms. Then I guess we've got a war coming. Caleb looked out across the burned ranch. The night wasn't over yet, because somewhere out in the desert, Victor Kane was still waiting. And when he learned what happened here, he would come himself. Morning came slowly to Hartley Ridge Ranch. The storm had finally passed, leaving the prairie washed clean beneath a pale, golden sunrise. Smoke still drifted from the ruins of the barn, and broken fence posts lay scattered across the muddy ground. The battle from the night before had left its mark. Sheriff Daniel Cole and his deputies were still moving around the property, gathering weapons and tying up the few outlaws who hadn't managed to escape into the desert darkness. Inside the ranch house, Caleb Hartley stood near the window, watching the rising sun. His face looked tired, but his gray eyes remained sharp. Behind him, Clara sat quietly at the table. The iron collar still rested around her neck, though the bomb mechanism had been removed earlier that morning. A local blacksmith from Dustwood was already on his way to cut the heavy metal ring apart, but even without the bomb, the collar still felt like a shadow hanging over her. Clara stared down at her hands. You lost everything, she said softly. Caleb turned slightly. What? Your barn burned. Half your fences are gone. And Cain's men killed several of your cattle. Caleb shrugged. Ranches can be rebuilt, but you risked it all. For me. He looked at her for a moment before answering. You weren't the only one they were hurting. Clara studied him carefully. You always like this? Caleb chuckled. Like what? Stubborn enough to fight an army. He leaned against the wall. Only when I have a good reason. Clara looked away quickly, before she could reply. The ranch door opened. Sheriff Cole stepped inside. His hat was damp with morning dew, and his expression was serious. We've got trouble, he said. Caleb crossed his arms. More of Cain's men? The sheriff shook his head. Not exactly. Clara looked up nervously. What do you mean? Sheriff Cole sighed. A rider came in from the southern trail an hour ago. Caleb's eyes narrowed, and he brought a message. The sheriff pulled a folded paper from his coat and handed it to Caleb. Caleb opened it slowly. The handwriting was sharp and deliberate. The message was short, but it made Caleb's jaw tighten. Instantly, Hartley, you killed my men. You burned my plans. Now I'm coming to finish this myself. Victor Canaclara's voice trembled. He's coming here? The sheriff nodded. My scout saw a group of riders heading toward the ridge. How many? Caleb asked. About 10. Caleb frowned. That's not many. The sheriff's voice dropped. That's because Cain doesn't travel with cowards. Clara stood up suddenly. You can't fight him. Caleb raised an eyebrow. Why not? Because Cain isn't just a rancher or outlaw, she said. He's a gunfighter. The room grew quiet. Clara swallowed. I saw him once. In the mining camp. Her voice shook slightly. He shot 3 men in less than 5 seconds. Caleb gave a small grin. That's impressive. Clara grabbed his arm. I'm serious. So am I. The sheriff adjusted his hat. Well, if he's coming, we might as well meet him properly. An hour later, the sun hung high above the prairie. The surviving ranch hands and sheriffs. Deputies waited near the front gate of Hartley Ridge. Dust appeared along the southern trail. 10 riders approached. Slowly. The front rode a tall man, dressed entirely in black. His coat flowed behind him in the wind, and his posture in the saddle carried the confidence of someone who had never feared a fight. Victor Cain. His horse stopped 20 yards from the gate. The other riders spread out behind him. Silence settled across the ranch. Cain removed his hat. Slowly, his dark eyes locked onto Caleb. So, he said calmly, you're the rancher who thinks he can steal from me. Caleb stepped forward. You're the man who thinks people belong in chains. Cain smiled slightly. People belong where they're useful. Clara stepped beside Caleb. Cain's eyes immediately found her. Well now, he said softly, my missing property. Clara's voice hardened. I'm not your property. Cain laughed. You were when I found you. He looked back at Caleb. You caused quite a bit of damage last night. Caleb shrugged. You started it. Cain's smile faded. You killed Lucas. He drew first. The outlaw leader studied him carefully. Then, he nodded once. Fair enough. Cain dismounted his horse. Slowly, the sound of his boots hitting the dirt echoed across the ranch yard. I'm a fair man. Hartley, Cain said. I believe in simple solutions. Caleb raised an eyebrow. Such as? Cain drew his revolver slowly. The movement was calm, deliberate. Just you and me. The ranch yard fell silent. Clara's eyes widened. No, but Caleb stepped forward. A duel? Cain nodded. Winner takes the girl. Caleb's expression hardened instantly. That's not how this works. Cain tilted his head. Then how does it work? Caleb rested his hand near his revolver. If I win, you and your men leave this territory forever. Cain considered that. And if I win? Caleb didn't hesitate. Then you take me instead of her. Clara gasped. You can't. But Cain smiled. I like that offer. The 2 men walked 10 paces apart. Sheriff Cole stepped between them. You both know the rules. Neither man responded. The sheriff stepped back. The wind blew across the prairie. Dust swirled around their boots. Clara's heart pounded. Please, she whispered. "Don't do this." But it was already too late. Sheriff Cole raised his hand, then dropped it. Draw. The guns flashed faster than lightning. 2 shots rang out across Hartley Ridge. For a moment no one moved. Then Victor Kane staggered. His revolver slipped from his hand. The bullet had struck him square in the chest. Kane looked down in disbelief. "You," he whispered, then he collapsed into the dirt. His riders fled instantly, galloping back toward the desert. The war was over. Clara ran across the yard. "Caleb?" He stood perfectly still. Smoke drifted from his revolver, then he slowly holstered it. Clara threw her arms around him. "You're alive." He smiled softly. Still stubborn, tears filled her eyes. "Thank you." A few hours later, the blacksmith finally cut the iron collar from Clara's neck. The heavy ring fell to the ground with a dull metallic clang. For the first time in months, she was free. That evening, Clara stood beside Caleb on the hill overlooking Hartley Ridge. The sunset painted the sky with deep orange and gold. "What will you do now?" Caleb asked. Clara smiled gently. "I was thinking of staying. Oh, there's a lot of work. Rebuilding this ranch." Caleb chuckled. "Yeah." She looked at him. "If you don't mind the help." He met her eyes. "I think I'd like that." The desert wind moved softly across the prairie, and for the first time since she had arrived in Dustwood, Clara felt something she had nearly forgotten: peace.